right, so we got a big one we got to dive in today because police in Utah are still looking for a suspect in the murder of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Now, Kirk was shot during an appearance at Utah Valley University just as he was answering a question about gun violence. He was the founder of the conservative youth organization Turning Point USA. Now, a culture warrior with millions of followers on social media and a close ally of U.S. President Donald Trump, he played a key role in driving support for Trump last November and used his platform to rail against liberal viewpoints on gun control, climate change, the civil rights movement, and the LGBTQ+ issues. So, what is your reaction, ladies, to yesterday's event? Sin, I'm gonna start with you.
I mean, so many feelings and emotions that have come up for me since around 3 p.m. yesterday when I found out about this. And I first want to say that I don't, obviously, I think I can speak for many of us or all of us in this room, I don't believe that anyone should be shot for their political beliefs or any other beliefs for that matter. I think that goes without saying. But I can't help but reflect upon the fact that over the past however many years, every time after we've seen a school shooting, and there was one in the United States yesterday, every time there's been a church mass shooting, a club mass shooting, that oftentimes the conversations, particularly from those on the right, have been thoughts and prayers, and no actionable decisions regarding gun control in the United States. So in my opinion, the conversations that immediately should be happening right now are about what are we going to do about the gun problem in the United States? How do we amend laws to make people safer? How do we avoid these things in the future? But instead of those conversations about gun control or about how to unite America, the conversations that I'm hearing, by and large, particularly from those on the right, is before we know who did this, we don't know. The conversations are about putting down the radical left. That's a quote. Put down the radical left. And this is a war. And I think that should be deeply concerning to all of us.
It's part of how we perhaps got here in the first place. Here's what I'm going to be honest that I'm struggling with, and I don't know if I'm alone in this. I don't think that I am. Clearly, political violence, which a lot of people are calling this, no one's going to condone it. No one's going to sit here and say, this was a great move, guys. No, of course it wasn't. This guy was a father. He was a young man. There are children who are going to grow up without a father, a wife that's going to grow up without a husband. No one is going to sit here and say, that's a great thing. We know that that's awful. This is a tragedy. Where I'm conflicted is this guy was a very controversial figure. So how do you hold space for both never condoning violence and also knowing this guy has said really heinous things, and he's got death threats for years because of the things that he says. So, for example, I'm sorry that I even have to quote this, where he said, he was talking about affirmative action 2 years ago, and he was talking about Michelle Obama. He was talking about a lot of prominent women saying, we can simultaneously, oh no, I'm sorry, I didn't even say that right. I'm gonna find the quote in a second, but he basically said that black women don't have a brain, and therefore, why are you trying to take someone's place just because you don't have the brains to actually earn that space? Like, he said heinous things about trans people, black people, women. He says that women, you should be prioritizing having children, forget careers. Like, so how do you hold space for someone like that right now? And that's really difficult. I don't want anybody dead. I don't want anybody dead, but he said really bad things that hurt a lot of people.
I think I think a lot of us are struggling with that. I definitely struggled with that because I'll be honest, I had never heard of Charlie Kirk up until yesterday. And so, so when I saw the news coverage, they were just giving us like the facts of what happened, but I'm like, who is this person? Because traditional news was not going into the clip. So I went online. Unfortunately, the first video I saw was of him being murdered, assassinated, and I was like, wow. And then I saw all the clips, and I saw him debating a lot of university college students on all of the things that you're talking about, gun rights, abortion rights, and I realized very quickly that him and I don't align. And then there's a complicated feelings because on the one hand, I don't align and I don't agree with anything he had to say, and at the same time, I don't want to ever see someone get gunned down and while their wife and 2 small children were at that event. Right? So what do you do? Because a lot of people were quick to say, don't speak ill of the dead. Don't say this, don't say that. But then there's conflicting feelings because he spent his life mocking and minimizing a lot of people. And then I saw something, a psychotherapist who was on, because you know they have all these people, we have to fill our 24-hour news cycle. And they had this great therapist whose name I wish I remembered, but his point was great and I quoted him. It's healthy to acknowledge that boundary. We shouldn't feel obligated to manufacture sorrow for someone who didn't extend it to us or our community. And so I think a lot of us are, right? I think a lot of us...
I'm sorry to interrupt, and it was interesting that he, in fact, said that he didn't believe, like he felt empathy was a weakness.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't want empathy, some might say.
So it's, yeah, that's what I'm saying, the complicated feelings of knowing and seeing what happened and also knowing what he said while he was alive. And then it's okay to hold that space, to not ever celebrate. We're not celebrating what happened to him. But at the same time, maybe your empathy tank is a little dry today because you've heard what he said and you're like, I don't know how to reconcile those feelings. And that's how I was feeling about it.
Listen, I wouldn't say my empathy tank is dry. And in fact, last night, first when I heard about this, I really wanted to watch different types of news coverage, right? Your traditional left-leaning news, your traditional right-leaning news, and also social media. And when I went on social media, first of all, immediately I was fed visuals of this man's murder. It was
horrible.
It was awful.
awful.
And it just, you know, it began to make me think, is there an entire generation now who is desensitized to this type of violence?
Absolutely.
Or is seeing what a bullet can do to human flesh? Could that actually move the needle on gun rights in that country? I'm not sure. And I'm not necessarily hopeful because I was watching visuals from the floor of the House of Representatives yesterday, and there were Democrats and there were Republicans, and they are so divided they couldn't even get a 30-second moment of silence for this man right. They did the 30-second pause, and immediately it devolved into screaming, blaming on both sides. And it's just so clear to me that there are many people, whether liberal or Republican or Democrat in the US, who feel unseen. And for a large portion of that country, this man made them feel seen. I don't agree with many of his beliefs, but many people in that country do. And he was killed in an incredibly violent, vicious, public way. Speculation is running rampant. So where do we go from here? It feels like that country needs a therapist to bring them back together, and I don't think they have one.
No. Can I speak on that a little bit? Because the country is broken. And I've said many times on this show that when America sneezes, Canada catches a cold. So you're wondering, why is a Canadian talk show talking about this? Because this kind of rhetoric and behavior tends to bleed over to us in some ways. 2 words, freedom convoy, okay? That's all I'm gonna put out there. I think leadership is where my head goes to this, because in the past, the convention for the President of the United States is they call him Commander-in-Chief, but in times of crisis, and today is September the 11th, and that's not lost on us, that in times of crisis, the left and the right have historically come together because the Commander-in-Chief turns into the Comforter-in-Chief and the Uniter-in-Chief. They don't have that right now, and in fact, they have a leader who is perhaps stoking the fires of division rather than saying, everybody, we need to de-escalate because this is crazy. And instead, so my fear for the country, and then you throw social media and algorithms and polarization into the mix, I don't know who is going to step up to try and unite something that clearly is only going to push America further apart. So we have to stay vigilant here, and where are our leaders and what do we expect of our leaders in times of crisis?
That's right, and where we see evidence of that seeping in, again, the divisiveness, we have to resist it because it is by design. We don't know exactly who's the architect of all of this. It's many, many factors go into something like this, but like the more we divide each other, the more, again, like destabilizing that is for an entire nation. And I do think that we do need to pay close attention. Ezra Klein wrote in the New York Times, political violence is a virus. It is contagious, and this is a dark turning point. And I do think this moment yesterday is a dark turning point, and we have to pay close attention. We do.
Yeah.
Hey, you, come a bit closer. We've got so many more must-see interviews, spicy debates, lifestyle tips, and pop culture moments. So subscribe to our channel by tapping the logo below and don't miss out.